Can you guys hear me okay, or should I use the microphone? We do have microphones.
Okay.
You think so? Microphone? Oh, a little closer. Okay. You know what, I'll do microphone just in case. We're going to record it, so no bad language from the audience. Okay, so welcome. So we're going to talk a little bit about the history of comic books in Idaho, and we're going to, I'm going to try to go through the slides kind of quickly because we have, as our special guest, Joëlle Jones. I used to have a podcast for comic books and stuff, and I've been dying to interview her for years, so I'm going to try to get to the good part as quickly as we can. So when you think about comic books, do you think about Idaho? No, obviously you don't. But there are some connections, like the leader. He's an arch enemy of the Incredible Hulk, and he worked as a janitor in Boise, Idaho, before he was exposed to gamma radiation. He first appeared in Tales to Astonish number 62 in 1964. He was created by Stan Lee and Steve Ditko. And then you probably didn't know that there is a Ernest Hemingway Batman Idaho connection. So there's a book that was written called Hemingway's Guns, the Sporting Firearms of Ernest Hemingway. And they wrote that the last gun that Papa ever used was sliced up by a welder in Ketchum, and the remnants were buried in a field out there. That property was later bought by Adam West. So I always like to say that the last gun that Hemingway ever used is in the Batcave in Idaho. So, and this is an old Sun Valley Ketchum Haley phone book. And Adam West is in there. If you look up Adam West, it says, see Bruce Wayne Millionaire. If you look up Bruce Wayne Millionaire, it says, please consult crime fighters in the yellow pages. When you do that, it says, see Batman in the white pages. And then when you look up Batman in the white pages, it says, see Adam West. So it's good to know that if we're ever in a spot of bother here in Idaho, we have a way to contact Batman. So to find the true origins of the history of comic books in Idaho, we have to travel back in time to a time before comic books even existed. We're going to go back to Idaho, 1891, just 1 year after Idaho was admitted as the 43rd state. Edgar Rice Burroughs was born in 1975 in Chicago, and he was a creator of Tarzan and John Carter of Mars. And he first visited Idaho in the summer of 1891 to help out his brothers on their ranch at the confluence of the Raft and Snake Rivers in eastern Idaho. And he was 15 years old at the time. He made daily trips to American Falls to pick up mail and supplies, and at the end of the summer, he was sent back to boarding school in Massachusetts. He returned to Idaho again in 1898 for the spring roundup to help his brothers, and he briefly owned a photography and stationery shop in Pocatello. And this is where he received his famous head injury in a bar fight that led to lifelong headaches and hallucinations, possible inspiration for some of his more fanciful stories. Reports vary. He said that he was watching a fight and a cop clocked him on the back of the head. Other people say he was involved in the fight. Anyway, he sold his shop and he returned to Chicago again in 1899. And there he married his childhood sweetheart, and he returned to Idaho in 1903. And there he helped his brother George with his gold dredges in the Stanley Basin in the Salmon River. Then he moved to Parma for another dredge, and he ran for city alderman of Parma, and he won. It was there that he wrote a story called Minidoka on the back of old bills and stationery left over from his shop. And 100 years later, that book was published by Dark Horse Comics as Minidoka, 137th Earl of 1 Mile. And there's a plaque that they have in Rupert, Idaho, kind of commemorating the gold dredges, and they mention Edgar Rice Burroughs in on the plaque. So he didn't find gold, physical gold, while he was here, but I would argue he did find gold here in Idaho. With his adventures and inspiration for writing. His Minidoka was the first. It's the oldest surviving story that we have from Edgar Rice Burroughs. And so he left Idaho for the final time in 1904. And then in October of 1912, Tarzan and the Apes was serialized in the pulp magazine, All Story magazine. And so pulp magazines were kind of like precursors to comic books. Later, the serialized story was released as a novel in 1914, and then many other novels followed by Burroughs. And then later, Tarzan of the Apes was adapted as a newspaper strip in 1927, and he made his first comic book appearance in 1947. And Tarzan and his other characters like John Carter of Mars and Deja Thoris still appear in comic books to this day. For a long time, there wasn't a lot of other stuff, like another connection to Idaho via comic books, but there was one in the 1960s. In 1963, I was told by my uncle, I've never been able to verify this, but I was told that this comic book was intentionally released on the centennial of the establishment of the Idaho Territory, and it just happened to work out that way. Dell Comics of New York City released Idaho, and it was like a cowboy adventure series. It ran 8 issues, and probably the most famous person that worked on it was a frequent Jack Kirby collaborator, Vince Collada. Then again, there wasn't like a whole lot of stuff coming out of Idaho or any Idaho connections outside of Tarzan and John Carter. But in the 80s, Dave Stevens released The Rocketeer with Eclipse Comics, and he used to live in Boise for a time. And I actually was best friends with this kid that Dave Stevens used to babysit, like when he was younger. Kind of a weird connection there. And but he was kind of he did all sorts of art. He inked Russ Manning's art for his Tarzan comic strip. He was a storyboard artist for Raiders of the Lost Ark and the Michael Jackson Thriller video. There was more money in the movie stuff than there were comic books, unfortunately, but his comic books were amazing, an incredible artist. And then he released his own movie in 1991 with Disney, The Rocketeer. You guys probably remember that film. And this is kind of an interesting side note. He did a signing at the Paperback Place on Fairview. I don't know if anyone remembers that shop. But there was a young fan named James Lucero that taught him into coming to his house and drawing on his wall. So that there's original artwork by Dave Stevens on this guy's, and it's still in his room at his house, at his parents' house. And then we're going to talk now a little bit. This is also in the 80s. Well, this one's from '79, but this is from Professor Tom Tresky, who was a professor of English at Boise State, and he released this multiple award-winning literary magazine called Cold Drill. And this is one thing that kind of came in the packet. They were very interesting because they were like loose leaf boxed rather than books, so they were kind of neat things. And so this wasn't included in the 1979 edition. And this one, and we have an example of it over here next to Joëlle, like some of the stuff that Dr. A. Stryker was kind enough to bring over from the archives at Boise State. This was a comic book that was released in, 1984. This was a part of the 1984 Cold Drill magazine. They also sold the individual issues by themselves. And it was actually the first 3D comic book published in the 80s. Dr. Tresky actually took out ads like in comic book trade magazines and stuff at the time, and so like people from all over the country would order copies of the book, and they got shipped everywhere, all over the nation. And after that, like people were like, hey, we should start doing 3D comic books again. They're really cool. And so Ray Zone started doing 3D comic books again in the 80s. After that, and the lady that wrote and drew the story, her name's Marie Geis, and she won a Golden Circle Award from the Columbia Scholastic Press Association for the comic book. And it was a satire on the Boise Police Department's massage parlor raids that led them to moving out to like Canyon County instead of being in Boise anymore. And then in the 90s, Andy Garcia kind of jumped onto the scene. He's kind of the J.D. Salinger of comic books for Idaho. He did like a bunch of stuff, and then he just disappeared. He lives here in the valley somewhere, but he doesn't come to comic book shops. He doesn't come to conventions. He used to work at New Mythology Comics on Broadway, and he wrote and illustrated Oblivion City and Seth Robb Underground Comics for slave labor graphics in San Jose, California for Dan Vado. And then he also inked Scott Pencer's artwork for for Bishop Press. He hasn't been seen in years. If you see him, take a picture, because he's hard to find. And then also around this time, Bishop Press started up in 1994, and they were running out of 1 million comics on Overland Road. It was by the Hill brothers, Jason and Kevin Hill. So they owned a comic book shop, and then they started publishing as well, and they did these really great comic books. They did one called Rose and Gun, and another one called Sade. And this is like a really nice mixed media piece that they did for a cover for one of their Sade comic books. And all the artwork was done by Scott Pencer. Later they merged with London Night Studios out of Hickory, North Carolina. And they sold the comic book shop and just kind of went away. These comic books were known for being very violent, and there was nudity and stuff. Kevin later became a pastor, and he does not talk about the comic books anymore. Then the 90s, if you were to ask me my favorite comic book series of all time, this is my favorite comic book series of all time. This is from Dennis Eichhorn. They're autobiographical stories, many of which take place in Idaho. And they're kind of like neo-underground comics. And Charles Bukowski even actually contributed a book he contributed a poem to the book. So Dennis wrote Real Stuff and other titles for Fantagraphics in Seattle starting about 1990. He graduated from Bora and Boise Junior College, and then later the University of Idaho. He actually played football for the University of Idaho too. And he was very well regarded. I mean, he only did it for a very short time. And but he was a finalist for the Eisner Award for Best Writer in '93. And that year was the toughest competition probably of all time. He was up against Alan Moore, Neil Gaiman, Frank Miller, Dave Sim, Garth Ennis. So just to be nominated with those guys, I think it's basically winning the award to me anyway. He was also a finalist for the Best Continuing Series, Real Stuff, in '93, Best Anthology in '93, and then again in '94. He did win one he won a Harvey Award for Best New Series for Will Eisner's The Spirit, The New Adventures in 1999. And then he was an Ignatz Award finalist for The Legend of Wildman Fisher story. And then he was recognized by America's Best Comics as notable comics for 2015 and 2016. Rance Hosley is from Lewiston. He edited comic book Taboo, tales inspired by Telray Amos, and it featured an introduction by Neil Gaiman. He won the 2009 Eisner Award for Best Anthology and Best Publication of Design, and then the Harvey Award for Best Anthology. And then he got another Eisner Award nomination in 2023. You guys probably don't know that Oatmeal actually used to live in Idaho. He lived in Hayden Lake for a little bit. It's Michael Inman. He created the Oatmeal website in 2009, and he won an Eisner in 2014 for Best Digital Webcomic. And in 2016, he received the Bob Clampett Humanitarian Award from the San Diego Comic-Con. And you probably see him at gift shops. He does those exploding kitty games and that sort of thing. So that's kind of what he's working on now. And then Alan Gladfelter, he's from Boise. He graduated from Boise State. He was an artist for Disney Pixar's Cars. He also did comic books for Hotel Transylvania and The Penguins of Madagascar. And we have an example of some of his work over here that he illustrated a comic book about a Mexican luchador by Charles Soule, which was a really big deal. When I saw that comic book, I could not throw my money at the staff fast enough to buy it. I was so excited to see. He also contributed to Occupy Comics, which also had a really great article on the history of comic books by Alan Moore. He did the Inspector comic strip for Boise Weekly. He has an Associated Press Award and Idaho Press Club Award. There's so many. I think we're going to get on time now. Jacob Bear, actually a protege of Rob Liefeld, the guy that created Deadpool. He used to live out in Fruitland. He's living in Arizona right now, but he does these really great comic books called Bat Bear, and Super Bear. And then he has another one called Rhino Boom that was featured in an anthology by Exciting Comics from Antarctic Press. And he's worked for DC Comics and Antarctic Press and Xenoscope and others. Steve Wilhite, he's from Payette. And he contributed to an anthology called Fubar, and it reached number 6 on the New York Times bestsellers list for graphic novels back in 2012. And he's done work for a bunch of people too. He's done Antarctic Press, Alterna, Image Comics. He's here at the con today, so if you see him, tell him that we're talking about the history of comic books in Idaho, and check out his stuff. His stuff's really great. Adrian Relp from Shelley Blackfoot. He used to be the former lead story artist at Disney. He worked for Archie Comics, Dynamite Entertainment, and American Mythology Productions. And he's at the con here today. Today's tomorrow, obviously. So yeah, I should come out, if you see him, check out his stuff. And then Van Notes, you probably saw as he came in today that they're giving out free copies of these really great comic books that Boise Comic Arts Festival presents. This is the first year that they're doing it. So it's got his stuff is really great. So pick up a copy, it's really cool. He's here as well. He is the creator of the Enigma Agents. It's a really interesting hybrid between comic book and kind of a kids activity book. The first issue, he sold it with this really cool specialized pen that came with the issue. It was really neat. He's also the author of Spy Ninjas and Piggy Books. And I don't know if you could kind of remember from when we talked about Idaho comics before, he kind of got the inspiration for this idea from and the kind of the layout of the cover from those old Idaho comic book covers. And then we kind of get into slightly more recent times, about 2010-ish decade, Mystery House Comics, and it was founded by John Keithley and Sinead Lavelle, and they published Shivertown and the 6x6 comic book anthology. And these guys were the masters of marketing. They always did really great release parties for their comic books, at different bars and stuff downtown. They were always a lot of fun. And they organized the original Boise Drink and Draw at the old Space Bar downtown. And they kind of helped spark the current local comic book scene, along with Randall Kirby. Randall's here as well at the con. And he's the founder, writer, artist, editor for Bob Comics. He was born in Nampa. And he was the creator of the local the local Idaho supervillain, the Potentator. And he's also created some of his other characters are Flying Man, the Scarlet Mortimer, Spud Monkey, Captain Zombie, Emaciated Corpse Boy, Love Mad, and others. So he does kind of funny superhero comics, but also LGBT stuff. And he was actually featured in an issue of Vanity Fair about maybe 8 years ago now. So it was kind of cool that he got that recognition. And then this is my thing. This is Idaho Comics Group. This is an officially licensed Tarzan comic book series we had to get with Edgar Rice Burroughs Incorporated to license the character. At the time, they actually had licensed Tarzan to Dark Horse Comics in Portland, so they had to get special permission from them to allow us to do the comic book. And it was kind of a comic book to showcase local writers and artists from the state of Idaho. And then all the proceeds went to the Boise Public Library. And then we also had another anthology called Idaho Comics as well. And it features some of the people who that contributed to the comic book series was Charles Soule, Dennis B. Eichhorn, Todd Clark, Bill Shelley, Scott Pencer, Steve Wilhite, Randall Kirby, Dane Darcy, and many others. And issue number 3, we got a letter of encouragement from local author and Pulitzer Prize-winning writer Anthony Dillard. And then right before I put together the slide deck, I found out that Joe Quesada lives in Sun Valley. I had no idea, and leading up to the Comic-Con in San Diego this year, for about 2 weeks, there were these news articles like, hey, there's a comic book company coming to Idaho, like a big comic book company that's going to start. Nobody knew who it was. I thought it was Jamie S. Rich for a while.
A little bit.
And but nobody knew who it was. Nobody was like, who's coming here? Somebody's coming here with deep pockets, big backing. It's going to be like a big time deal. It's Joe Quesada. He was the really great artist. He was a former Marvel Comics editor-in-chief, and now the founder of Amazing Comics. And like the marketing thing was like, it's Idaho's #1 comic book company. It's like, you know, not a lot of competition. You know, the other thing that was kind of interesting, I don't know if he still lives there anymore, but like in the 90s, this artist, Rick Leonardi, he used to draw, he did a lot of stuff for Marvel. I always remember him from the X-Men. He lived in Sun Valley too. And then like one of the articles that interviewed like Joe Quesada about like coming to Idaho and starting up Amazing Comics, he had a quote that said like, "There's no lonelier place to produce comics than Idaho." So if you see this guy, send it my way, because I got a lot of people I can introduce him to. And then Joëlle Jones, local girl makes good. Went to Bora High, worked for Marvel Comics, DC Comics, Dark Horse, New York Times, and many others. She's the creator of Yara Flor, the new Wonder Girl from Boise for DC Comics, and her creator-owned character, Josie Schuler from Lady Killer. Incredible artist. Please help me welcome Joëlle Jones. I've been dying to interview you for years, so this is like, I'm really excited. So anyway, like a couple things really quick too. She was an Eisner Award finalist for Best Limited Series in 2016 for Lady Killer. Also a finalist for Best Penciler Inker, and Best Cover Artist that year. You got robbed that year, like 3 categories. But she did win the 2018 Ringo Award for Best Cartoonist. So I thought I'd start with a silly question. I could swear that I read this, and I can't find it again now. This is you didn't do this cover, but this is the cover of Power Girl Special #1. It's done by Stanley Art Germ Loud. Were you the inspiration for this cover? Like, did you model for this or anything?
No, and I've heard this rumor, but...
You have heard it before?
Yeah.
Okay. Can you do your mic? Yeah. So you have heard it?
Yeah, I think I heard it because somebody told me that at San Diego Comic-Con.
Okay, so
I've never even seen, but Art Germ and I, we've tabled together many times.
Oh, really?
Because he did all my covers, my variant covers for the Catwoman run.
Oh, right on. That's
So we know each other.
Okay.
Yeah.
I swear that I read that and I was like, I don't know if it's...
I mean, I'll take it.
Yeah, it's a beautiful
I'll pretend
color.
it's
It's
true.
amazing. Yeah, it's a fantastic cover. Yeah, I'm glad that you heard it too, because I was going crazy trying to find it. I swear that I could see it. I saw it somewhere on the internet or somewhere.
Oh, and before we get too much on other things, Terry Dodson used to live here too.
Oh, okay, okay.
So you can add that. You can add a slide for him.
He lives here?
He used to live here.
Oh, he used to live here. Okay.
And I think he's moving back.
Really?
We've been talking about it. But yeah.
Wow, that's crazy. So we're going to turn into the new Portland, I guess, right?
I'm trying.
So the first question to start, like, how did you choose to go into comic books?
Well, I mean, I've always loved comics. My comic shop was actually a Million Comics. It was nowhere near my neighborhood, but yeah, I had friends that had cars. But before that, I would just steal them from my older brother. Yeah, I've just been obsessed with comics my whole life, and I got into an argument with one of my brother's friends. He said he wanted to be a comic book artist. I said I was going to do it first.
Oh, wow.
And I meant it, and I hold a grudge.
Well, thank God, that's great. So so the one up on Overland, yeah?
Which one? The paperback place?
Or no, you said it was 1
Oh,
million.
1 million, yeah. Yeah. I only found out about Paperback Place, like, after I left high school.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Okay. That's crazy. Wow. Did you know those guys? Did you know, like, Kevin?
I didn't know that they owned it.
Oh, you didn't? Oh,
I
okay.
met them.
Oh, okay.
That's
Did
so
you know?
funny.
Did you know Scott? Have you met Scott? Scott?
In passing. It was like a work thing, like function that we had to all go to, but
Oh,
I
okay.
didn't really get to talk to him.
Okay, that's cool.
But now that I know that, I'm gonna find it. Now I've got a reason to talk to him.
Exactly. That's awesome. So, like, who are your inspirations? Like, as a creator, as a writer and an artist. I'm a '90s kid, and I was really obsessed with Chris Picciolo. Oh, okay.
Still am.
Uh-huh.
I mean, it's all over the place. Everybody asks me that, and then my brain goes blank as soon as that happens. Obviously, like Adam Hughes and, you know, all of those guys. Like, I love J. Scott Campbell, all those guys.
Oh, yeah.
Roberto Ramos, and see, it's coming.
I can see the inspiration there with those two guys for sure, at least. Yeah.
Yeah,
That's awesome.
yeah.
So the comic book industry is kind of male-dominated, I would say. In your experience, do you think it's been harder as a woman to work in comics?
Yes.
Do you think so? Why do you say that?
Oh, well, you know, it's just tricky when you're one of very few. Like
Yeah.
when I got my start, I think there were only a handful of women, besides like the women that came before me, the
Right.
generation before me, had it really, really hard.
Oh, sure.
And then, you know, I was maybe like the third wave of women coming into the industry, and, you know, we had it nowhere near as hard. We got a lot of, like, got tokenized quite a bit.
Oh, yeah.
So they're just like, you know, we need to have a public appearance, so just like, what girl can we throw on? That kind of thing. So it's not like hard is tricky, you know, hard in some ways.
Mm-hmm.
And, you know, you constantly have to prove that you like comics over and over again.
Yeah.
You have to prove that you know things about comics over and over again. But, you know, it's not at all like what it used to be, so.
Yeah.
I'm
Well,
very
that's good,
grateful.
and that's good. Yeah.
Yeah.
That's awesome. So, like, as a writer, what kind of stories are you trying to tell?
I don't know, I love bouncing around different genres,
Mm-hmm.
but I get really, really self-conscious. So to kind of keep me going, I just usually try to write to entertain myself, and so I'm just writing to like make myself giggle or have a good time, and yeah, stay out of my own head thinking about people reading it. So yeah, whenever I do that, I always mess it up.
That's awesome. So, and then it was around 2018 or so that you were tasked to design like statues for DC Comics, and those were called like the DC Cover Girl statues. What was it like to see your artwork like in a 3D rendering?
It was so cool. I mean, they made my drawings look better than the drawings. But it was so much fun. Like, it was really, really fun. Also getting shipped toys in the mail, opening a box and oh my gosh, these are all mine.
That's awesome.
That was the best one.
That's really cool. So, like, let's see. So you had, I'm trying to remember. You had 4 statues. That they did?
I think it was 6 in total.
Oh, okay. So, okay.
I think I killed the line too because that was the very last one.
Oh no.
But they merged with another company. So
Oh,
it's
okay.
okay.
That's great. Yeah, those statues are beautiful. They're amazing. And then Lady Killer. So how did you come up with Lady Killer?
I was in a really weird spot in my career. I've been working what I call like I was a jobbing artist. You know, I wasn't really working for the big 2. I wasn't doing any genres that really piqued my interest. Again, I think sometimes when you're a girl, you can get pigeonholed, and so I kept getting YA and romance books, and those are wonderful genres, but they're not genres I enjoy or drawn to. So I was really losing like a lot of my spark, and I thought, well, I never wanted to write. I'm not interested in writing, but nobody's gonna offer me the job I want. So it was a matter of make up your own job, kind of thing.
That's awesome. That's really great. That's cool. So let's see. And then you also created Yara Floor for as the new Wonder Girl, and she's from Boise.
Yeah.
That was really awesome. Why did you decide to make her from Boise?
I mean, it's a really weird story. Right before COVID happened, all of the DC writers, we had a huge writers summit in Los Angeles. They stick us in a hotel for like 4 days, and they give us a lot of alcohol and like terrible like pig meal sandwiches. And then we have to just come up with a bunch of stuff while our editors yell at us. And it was, we walked in, and I've been to several of those, but this was really strange. And he's like, we're going to kill everybody. We're going to get rid of Diana Prince. We're going to get rid of Bruce Wayne. Clark Kent, gone. And so we're going to have to, we want brand new ones to take up the mantle. And they called that 5G. I don't know.
Oh, that's right. I forgot about that.
Yeah, and it was really complicated. And like there was a whiteboard with different timelines, and it was, I didn't pay attention for a lot of it. But I was really like, I was like, oh, okay, well, I was in a room with really heavy hitting writers.
For sure.
And I thought, well, I'll just daydream and play around with an idea. But obviously they're not going to give me Wonder Woman. Well, turns out they all wanted to have Bruce Wayne, obviously. So I was like, oh, well, Wonder Woman's just sitting over there. And so I pitched this idea, and they're like, well, they had certain parameters, and so what they needed were like 3 really bizarre things. Like she has to be from the Amazon, she has to have a wing horse, she has to have a bolo whip. I'm like, okay. And then the rest was kind of up to me. So I got to writing her as a fully fledged Wonder Woman. And then COVID happened. And I think it was like, artists were all given the command of like pencils down. Everybody's really worried about the future, what's going to happen. And DC no longer wanted to take a chance. This is my guess, I don't know. But they no longer wanted to take a chance on such a really potentially disastrous idea, or amazing, who's to say. So I was told, they're like, well, you still get to do it, but now it's Wonder Girl. And I have a lot of feelings about that. As far as the moniker of being called a girl, and I just thought it was silly, but fine, whatever. It's my job. So, I think I did Future State, and no, I did Future State because I was like, well, nobody's going to look at this. It's not Diana Prince and whatever, but I'm just going to have a good time. And I really, genuinely had a blast.
Oh, that's awesome.
And then it sold really well, and I wasn't ready for that. Because they're like, and now we want a series. And it starts next month, so go. And I was like, oh no, I don't have a backstory, I don't have anything. I was just told that she's no longer a woman, she's a girl, like that changes everything. And I did a lot of research on the Amazon, but I would never be able to do enough to know what it's like to have an origin story full of trauma in that setting. And I wanted to approach it with respect, but so I thought, the most respectful thing I could do was have her born there and taken away, and then bring her back so that we can experience it, me and Yara get to experience it together. So that, I don't pretend to know what I'm talking about.
That's actually ingenious, because especially if it's a culture that you're not familiar with, that's like a minefield. I mean, because like you know, you could be like as absolutely respectful as you mean to be, as I could possibly be, but like you're just not from that culture. But yeah, to take her out and then bring her back in, that's ingenious. Actually, a really good idea.
Yeah, it's like somebody saying that they're from Idaho, but they don't know what a Huckleberry Jim is. So yeah, but immediately, like, all these interviews started, and they're like, oh, it's a new Wonder Girl. And it was a joint interview with my editor, me, and the reporter, and the reporter's like, where's she from? And my editor told me, like, 2 places. She couldn't be from New York, and she couldn't be from Oregon. And so I was just like, I don't know, Boise. She's from Boise. That's where I'm from. And she's from Boise. And I just kind of laughed. And then she wrote it down, and that's what it became.
That's so cool. Yeah, you have, this is the first, let me jump over here. I brought some comic books for her to sign for me after this, but like, this is, what is this, Infinity Frontier?
Oh yeah, I think that was the first appearance.
This is the very first appearance of Yara Flor, and yeah, she's like setting off for Brazil from the Boise airport.
It's a way prettier airport than we have. I tried to draw the Boise airport, and I'm like, this is so boring.
I had no idea that she came about from 5G.
Mm-hmm.
That is insane, because like I didn't know what to think about 5G. I remember I kept reading all these stories about 5G, and I'm like, and it seemed like it kept getting pushed out, and I'm like, okay, when is this going to happen? It's like, I don't know, it's going to be either, it's going to be amazing or it's going to be horrible. But yeah, that blows my mind. And so what happened with 5G? It just kind of went away? They just like decided?
Well, it was going to be a